I'm Harry, and on behalf of the CreativeMornings team, Laurie and I would like to welcome you. Croeso I Art Hall. Pretty cool spot, eh? First off, I'd really like to thank Printed Festival, Tom and Jude, the whole Printed Pay, the people who organise what has come to be like one of the coolest things on in the calendar in Cardiff, and a bit of a stalwart now, really promoting what artists, print artists do to the people of Cardiff and beyond. This month's theme from CreativeMornings is punk. And usually they give you a bit of like a blurb to like talk about punk or revival or mentorship or something. But I've only got 4 lines on this one. It says, your creativity can save you. What you're gonna make, what you're gonna change, wake up, wake up, wake up. So there we are. Just take what you want from that, I suppose. But yeah, pretty cool illustration from the Bologna chapter in Italy, illustrated by Cristina Ortolano. Me personally, punk. I suppose it is an attitude to everything, not just music. But for me, it's like this belief. It's belief that you can produce something that's of value, and you don't need the best equipment, you don't need the best training, you don't need all the chords, basically. You can go produce whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, and it is of value. And that is punk to me. But yeah, that's enough of my rambling. I'd like to thank Adobe. Adobe make this happen. They basically give us the money that enable us to buy the beers, buy the pizzas and stuff, and when we are in the mornings, the coffee shop, and to support like the businesses that we use. We try and move around Cardiff, and it kind of becomes this self-fulfilling sort of supportive network, but that can only come through cash, unfortunately, and that cash comes from Adobe. And they're promoting this level up thing. I'm going to read off this. Basically, we're teaming up with Adobe. They've got a whole series of sort of training videos and opportunities, and like basically so you can level up your Adobe game, and well, that's good of them. And that leaves me with our guest speaker tonight. Shaun Featherstone is an artist and curator. He runs something called the Red Shoes Poster Archive. Basically, archivists are amazing. Just bringing together, for over the years, different posters from punk influence to protest, influence from everywhere. So basically, I contacted Shaun because I knew that, one, he was part of Printed Festival, which I thought was really important, but also a lot of the posters that he's collected are rooted in that sort of working class protest movement, and also there's some aspect of the punk movement in that too. But I'm going to leave Shaun talk about that and how punk has influenced how he does his work. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I move this? Thanks very much, Printed Festival, CreativeMornings, and thanks everyone for coming. slightly overwhelmed by how many of you there are. I wasn't expecting quite so many. But I don't recognise too many people, so that's a good thing. And I've just borrowed my partner's glasses, so I can't actually see you anyway. So, yeah, but I can see this, which is the most important thing. Yeah, so just to start off and kind of describe what I'm going to be talking about, it's very much a personal take on what I credit punk with giving me and what it still does give me. And so I guess it's sharing my relationship to punk. And I'm not in any way an expert about the subject, so this is just straight from the heart, a sort of gut response really, from someone who's been asked to talk about punk, which was a very easy thing to say yes to. I'm also not an academic either, but I have found myself doing quite a lot of reading and research in preparation for this, partly because it's an area I've always obviously had an interest in. And so it was a good excuse really to read some more material and ideas about that people have about punk really, and obviously I'll share my ideas as well as a sort of cultural point of reference. I realised when I was reading my notes earlier I hadn't actually put. I thought I'd better declare that I used to be a punk. Maybe I still am. I don't know. But I was what was called a gothic punk. So any of you of a certain age might know that goths, as we know them, and they're probably called something else these days, goth comes from gothic punk because basically Susie Sue from the Banshees didn't look like any of the other punks, and she kind of gave birth really to the idea of being a goth by being a gothic punk. So that was me in the mid '80s anyway. So I've made, there we go. That's that. Really famous image, got referenced earlier, I think, the notion of chords. I'm going to come back to that in a bit. But for quite a long time now, I've been citing punk as an influence, certainly on my creative practice, but also, and more recently, as an influence on my personal development as a young adult, in relation to my social and political consciousness, and the decisions I made and the actions that I took as a young person growing up into adulthood, and the kind of roads I travelled down, and that's kind of led on to what has become my career, really. I think, looking back, so the thinking and the reading and the research that I've been doing about this talk, I think, albeit through a personal lens, has got me thinking about much of this in terms of taking risks, social privilege and entitlement, and I'm going to touch upon that later because that's I think that's quite important, and maybe that'll come out as we go through the talk. And this talk will also partly be a brief and incomplete history of my creative journey, because you can see I'm not the youngest person in the room, so you don't want to hear that all night long. But it will have all these punk reference points and stopping off points and things like that. So mostly it will be me sharing images that I like and are a bit punky or very punky, and hopefully generating ideas and questions from which we can all have a conversation later, because that's what really my work is all about, and my practice. It's about opening up dialogue and having conversations, and in my case it's sort of the things that I think are important and people should be more conscious of and talking about. So yeah, just starting off the conversation really, and to properly kick things off, we kind of need to think about definitions of punk, and what I've done here, I think I've been very clever, is I've given you a few definitions of punk, which I quite like. But really what I'm doing, and you probably can't read these because the screen's not that big, and I apologise, but it was just, I've done this to demonstrate that there are almost an infinite number of definitions of punk out there, And I think what Harry said earlier was really interesting. You know, it's punk is almost your sort of personal take on it, really. And I quite like the one in the middle, not just because it's got more text, but I quite like what it's saying. And so if you can, those of you near the front, you know, you might be interested in reading those, and I understand this is going to be available for you to look at again later. But I kind of put them up there just to illustrate how many different kind of definitions. There is no one definition of punk. And the other thing I did, just as a bit of fun, is I went on to DaFont, if any of you are into design, right? Yeah, lots of you are. And I just sort of Googled how many punk fonts there were, and so I just randomly got 3 punk fonts. And in fact, I've got more than that because I quite like quite a lot of them. But so they're all in punk fonts as well. So yeah, just thought you might like that. Anyway, yeah. And I guess the reason I'm sharing these is because I do think they're all valid, you know, and it kind of gets me off the hook in terms of feeling like I've got to define what punk is. But I reckon by the end of the talk, I'll give it a go and maybe have a go at a definition, because I feel like that would be not fair if I'm stood up here and I haven't kind of done that. I'm a notorious sitter on the fence. So yeah. Okay. And then now that I've dealt with that, I'm mainly not going to be talking about me, but I appreciate that you probably want to hear a little bit about it. So I referenced earlier about my journey as a young person, and how punk sort of maybe influenced that, and some of the things that punk encouraged me to do early in life was I accidentally went to art college, became a vegetarian. I got into animal rights. I started doing DJing and promoting at a really early age. And I eventually, when I went to art college, art college kind of brought a lot of the things that sort of got me there. That was where I properly started to join up the dots of you know, political consciousness, really. And but I got to share this story because I do credit Annie a lot. And so when I left school at 16, worked in Woolworths, and when I was 17, so I was full-time at Woolies, and one of the Saturday girls, that's what they were called, there were females who only worked on a Saturday, so they were called the Saturday girls. One of the Saturday girls was a punk, and she was also an art student, and she was a vegetarian, and she smoked, and she was gorgeous and cool, and we became friends. And she told me that I didn't know art college existed, right? I was an ordinary working class kid. None of my teachers told me about art college. I was really good at art at school, got you know, all the like A grades and all that sort of thing. But they never told me I could go to art college. And so I didn't think it was I didn't even know it existed. So she told me about that, and she was, in many ways, she was my inspiration, you know, and yeah, that's I always feel like she needs to be mentioned as part of my journey, my sort of political, social journey, really. And then the DJing and promoting thing, I'm going to mention that because it's literally 40 years ago, the anniversary this year. Me and my mate realised, because we got hold of this single that had come out, and we know it was 40 years ago that it came out, and we think, shit, was that 40 years ago? So we blagged our way into a local nightclub. I was brought up in Newquay in Cornwall, and this guy I was working with in Woolworths was a DJ, hotel DJ, and he basically lied to the nightclub owner, and this is very punk, I think, you know, and he basically got us a night in the local nightclub playing alternative music, because we wanted to go to a nightclub or a bar and listen to alternative music, and there was nowhere to go and listen to alternative music. And he sort of persuaded the nightclub owner, without really telling him exactly what we were going to do, that we were DJs and that we were friends of his. And then at like something like 8:30, because nightclubs shut at 1 o'clock back then. At 8:30, Kev, my mate, showed up, and he gave us a 5-minute lesson in DJing. It was brilliant, and he just watched us and he said, "Yeah, do it a couple more times. Yeah, you've got it." And he just disappeared, and that was it. But you know, it's we just took a risk. You know, we went for it, and then we did loads of nights until the nightclub owner, once we got it established, he did what most nightclub owners have done, and this happened to me at least half a dozen times. They wait until you get it established and get a big crowd, and then they kick you out. I was going to say something else then. They kick you out, they bring in their own people, and they take over what you've created. So, yeah, that's... I don't know if it's still like that now, but that was what it was like back then. So, yeah. So there's that image again, anyway. Throughout the talk, I'm going to share examples of things which I think are punk. And this is obviously totally punk. It's from 1976, Sniffing Glue fanzine. And it's really, really famous because it literally showed people how straightforward it was to form a band. And it's been credited many, many times by huge influential acts and musicians as being something that they saw at the time, and it inspired them to form a band. Don't ask me who they were, but yeah. And then I was at Bristol Transformed about a month ago. Bristol Transformed is a festival of socialism, culture, and ideas, or something like that. Really lovely festival over a weekend, and hopefully you can make this out at the back. But they've just taken exactly the same idea, but it's about creating a creche. There was a creche at Bristol Transformed, really important, and they just used exactly, you know, they took inspiration from this, and I just think it's brilliant, and I knew immediately when I saw it, because I think by then I knew I was doing this talk, so I grabbed a couple of copies, and on the back of it, which is even better, I think. So on the slide on the right, it's I'll just take my glasses off. It's universal free childcare now, but in the meantime, an ad hoc creche, and then there's a website and with a free step-by-step guide. So it's you know it's taking hold of the levers of sort of power, and it's saying, yeah, you don't have to kind of, you know, get permission, have a license, all that stuff. We can just create a creche, just like we can form a band. So I like that. As I mentioned, I've been doing quite a bit of reading, and one of the sites, I knew about it already, but one of the sites I was playing around with again is something called the Punk Scholars Network. And what's really great about them is they really take punk seriously and see it as a significant and enduring cultural force. And they have, you know, they have publications, events, conferences, and it's a worldwide network. There's just a couple of their posters because I'm primarily here as a poster archivist, so I've got some posters in the slideshow. And it got me thinking about my creative practice, my day job, and which isn't my creative practice. Like a lot of creatives, I have to have a day job to pay the bills, but I am quite creative in that. But also me as a human being in my community, and maybe how I do everything I do these days is better seen as a sort of praxis, a holistic praxis. So my work, setting up the Red Shoes Poster Archive, my day job, my activism, and things like how I've used creative approaches to organising for trade unions, designing training, and developing my pedagogy, and just the whole intersectionality of what I do. And I think that probably resonates with lots of you here. You know, these things don't all operate in silos, do they? They all cross over. Developing I feel like I've got a really reflective practice these days, and that's kind of a really lovely place to be. And the archive, as a creative form of activism, so collecting the material, showing it, using it as a resource, I feel that's a form of activism. So it kind of keeps me really busy now doing the archive. I've sort of created this sort of monster, really. Again, a bit like when I went to art college, it's all happened a bit by accident. And I approach all of this, like I said, with a holistic sort of creative mindset, but not deliberately, because I don't really plan what I'm doing. I just intuitively kind of go through life. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is, I think that's got something to do with punk. And I got particularly excited when I was doing the reading again, because I went back to something I knew a little bit about, called punk pedagogies. And there's loads of stuff on their site. And it's well worth checking out, especially if you're someone who teaches in whatever way that might be, in a formal way, or doing workshops, or just passing on ideas. However you might feel that you're a teacher, I'd recommend checking out punk pedagogies, because you might actually be a punk educator and not realise it. And I think it particularly might be prevalent in creatives. I think some of these ideas link to my lifelong belief that we're all inherently creative and have the potential for cultural agency. In fact, that's my day job. So in my day job, I work for Arts Council of Wales and Welsh Government on a creative learning project. And what I do, or part of what I do, is nurturing and facilitating creativity into people's practice, specifically teachers and creative professionals' practice. So it's really nice to sort of explore these synergies through a kind of punk lens, really. Obviously what gets in the way of that is capitalism and the power structures which sustain capitalism. I couldn't not get that in there, could I? So as I said, take a look at punk pedagogies. And the other thing, just to go back to activism as praxis, I found this lovely quote, which I'm going to share with you. It's really short. Basically, praxis means learning. It may seem simple, but few activists actually do it. Praxis requires us to be students of our own experience and context. And I love that. I think that's really nice. And I think I've got to the point in my practice where I do that a little bit. So on to some more examples. That's I'm not sure how well that's showing up, but this is brilliant. In Scotland, there's a one-day punk festival on an island, Cramond Island in the Orkneys, and it's only accessible through a causeway. If you don't know what a causeway is, it's a road that you can walk on that's only revealed at low tide. So they're typically associated with small islands, and so at low tide you can walk onto the island. So at low tide, once a year, all the punks, it's all completely free. So the punters and the bands and everyone involved in the festival, they walk on across the causeway with everything they need for the festival: instruments, amplification, food, booze, whatever. And then they have the festival while the tide rises, and then at low tide, they walk off. They take everything with them, including all the rubbish. And that's it. That's the festival, and that's about as punk as it gets, really. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's from Scotland, but yeah, brilliant. So that's Cramond Island of Punk. Not very far from here, I was very fortunate to visit Rockaway Park recently. It's been on my radar for several years, and it's really difficult to describe what Rockaway Park is. But it's a space that's owned by ex-members of a punk band called The Mob, and they bought a scrapyard that used to be a quarry. So it's in this kind of quarry, like this natural quarry. Well, obviously not natural, but you know what I mean. And they couldn't make a go of it as a scrapyard, so they turned it into this creative space now that people visit, and people make work there, and it's really like totally rooted in kind of punk ideas. It's a brilliant example of not waiting for electoral democracy to deliver the conditions we need to be kinder, more ethical and decent to ourselves. And of course, that's what the original ideas of festivals were all about. Not festivals as we know them today, but when they first sort of started in the 70s and 80s. And squatting as well. And lots of what you might call anarchist principles and values. And that's what is all over this place. It's amazing. Mutual aid, DIY culture, and all absolutely driven by and made tangible through creativity, innovation, risk, passion, commitment. It's really magical, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It's very difficult to describe. It's got a cafe. It's well worth a few hours of your time. It's amazing. And one of the really brilliant things about it, and it kind of grew out of COVID, and there's the next slide is sort of a little bit about the background, but I'll go back to this one. They've got this space called the Chapel of Unrest. I don't know if it's in the... Oh, it's just... Can you see that circular building there, look? Yeah, I've got a thing here, haven't I? This here, look, yeah? So that's the Chapel of Unrest. And it's the congregation of agitation. It's obviously not it's a completely secular space, but I just love it. And of course, when I left, because it was my Father's Day outing, that was where I wanted to go for Father's Day. I joined the congregation of agitation. It felt like just the sort of place for me. So I'll just read for those of you at the back. I'll go over here. The Chapel of Unrest is a call to unite in protest, to stand together against injustice. It's a declaration that we are not afraid of the ruins because we carry a new world in our hearts. Join the congregation. Let's amplify our voices, challenge the status quo, and build a future where protest shapes a better world. So, yeah. Join the Chapel of Unrest if you like the sound of that. Okay. Back to a couple of examples of my work, just really briefly. Yeah, I'm doing okay for time. This is an ongoing project. It started in 2014. It's called Resistance Assistance. It's a collection of about 70 umbrellas. I don't know if any of you have seen it. So that was an anti-far right demo in Cardiff. This was a trade union pay dispute in Pontypridd. This was in Merthyr Tydfil. Yeah, and the umbrellas are there for anyone to use to take and borrow for whatever purpose they want, as long as it's something that I'm okay with. You know, obviously wouldn't give it to certain types of people, but yeah, it's and it's been used for all sorts of demonstrations and events and occupations and that sort of thing, and it's still available. It doesn't get used quite so often these days because I'm not really. I've kind of been taken over by the archive now, so I'm not really promoting it anymore. But it's still there, and if you like the look of it and you want to use it, you're very welcome. So it's free, obviously. Yeah. And then there's the Red Shoes poster archive, which was mentioned earlier, and kind of why I'm here this weekend. This was an exhibition at the Big Picture at Chapter last June, I think. And a couple more slides on the archive. Again, for those of you at the back, I'll just read that out. Since launching in 2020, the archive has amassed over 2,000 physical posters, books and graphic ephemera. The objects in the collection tell the story of struggles and campaigns from across the progressive political spectrum: peace, anti-capitalism, industrial disputes, climate emergency, international solidarity, racial justice, civil rights and feminism, to name but a few. It gives people and communities access to original historical material about their own history. It's grassroots and not-for-profit. We're all volunteers. We're not constituted or anything. Internationalism and working-class solidarity are at the heart of what it is, and that's reflected in our approach to what we collect. There's a couple of pictures of some celeb lefties from a couple of years ago at World Transformed in Liverpool. So I did a big display of so they're original posters. They're not like copies. So one of the things I really sort of try to do is do things like that. So I used to be a museum curator, so I'm breaking every rule in the book doing stuff like this, because you're not supposed to do that with original material, because you're not looking after it. And but it's our history, isn't it? It's ours. It doesn't belong to, what's the point of having it if we're not able to see it? So yeah, that's kind of that's the Red Shoes poster archive anyway. One other thing I was going to share with you, which is not on a slide. I'll just hold a couple up and you can have a look at these later. So you probably can't see them. So I did a newspaper. It's probably the punkiest thing I've brought today. So there's a punk festival on the back. Look. So this was a newspaper published in 2012. An anti-monarchy newspaper to coincide with the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012, I worked with loads of artists in Cardiff and all over the UK and internationally. It's full of articles and artwork. It's got a couple of dodgy customers in it now who weren't that dodgy at the time. Morrissey's one of them. I'm sorry, I can't think. Forget her name now. Julie Birchall's in it as well. And there's someone else, I can't think who it was. So, but it is what it is. At the time, it was just a coming together of lots of people who wanted in some way to sort of do some kind of creative intervention against this sycophantic kind of love thing about the monarchy that just went on for months and months and months. So again, I did this by accident. I never intended to do this, but it's my work. A lot of my work is about shared agency and working with other people and coming up with ideas and then seeing if people want to kind of work with me, and then just sort of usually they do, and then we have some kind of final outcome like this. So I brought quite a few of these along. I'm not going to give them away though, because if anyone wants one, the money goes into the archive. So I'll be selling them at the Printed Festival, and I've got a few tonight as well. I haven't decided how much for yet, but I think maybe £5 or something. I don't know. Right. So if I haven't put you off by mentioning Morrissey and Julie Birchall, that is. On to a couple more examples, because I'm running a bit late now. So just down the road in Newport, brilliant space, working class cultural space called CAB, C-A-B. All they put on is punk. They don't do anything else. That's all they put on. And sometimes they put punk on in bigger venues in Newport as well. But please check them out. There's also a working class theatre company. In fact, the people who own the building are a mum and her two grown-up sons, and they kind of got together and bought this building in Newport. and I think they might live above it and everything. So it's just so that they could create a cultural space that they felt wasn't there and didn't represent them. So I love that. I love what they do. And then in Bogota, there's an artist. She's down the bottom there in black and white. The site is called Mala Influencia. That's terrible. It's Spanish, so I probably said that all wrong. But it translates as bad influence anyway. And what she does, as far as I understand it, is she takes punk posters and reproduces them as screen prints. And why I chose this is these are all, if you like, one sentence definitions of punk. Punk is passion, not business. Punk is attitude, not fashion. And there's a bunch of them up there anyway. Punk is support, not competition. So I just wanted to use this platform to show you her work as well. And then I felt like it was really important that we can't really have a conversation like this without referencing autonomous spaces. If you're not familiar with autonomous spaces, this is quite a nice definition here, which is actually just from Google's AI thing. But I really like how it describes an autonomous space, and I'm involved in a couple of autonomous spaces. Every year I go to a Green Gathering, which is a carbon neutral festival near Chepstow, really lovely festival, and it's all about trying to having a really good time, and there's music and bands and drugs and everything else, but also there's lots of workshops and trying to sort of see how we can actually deal with the climate emergency. And last year I went to Boomtown, which I don't think I'm going to go again, but there was this autonomous space run by Real News. That's REEL, Real News, and they're a brilliant kind of anarchist-led media filmmaking media collective, and they work internationally, and they have the autonomous space in Boomtown, and they've got an agreement with Boomtown that what goes on in that tent, this fairly large tent, is nothing to do with Boomtown, and if they want to, they can criticise Boomtown, and they've got that written into their agreement. Otherwise, they won't do the space, and I think that's brilliant, and that's what an autonomous space is. The only one I know of around here is the Bristol base. I'm probably not calling it the right name, but you can have a free Sunday dinner there, vegan Sunday dinner, and just rock up and get information and meet people. And I don't think we've got an autonomous space in Cardiff at the moment, but really important part of kind of a narco-punk culture for me anyway. So, just a couple of posters that I was involved in. I'm running late, so I'm not going to dwell on those. Right. And then I'm going to kind of, I'll go back to that actually. I'm just going to summarise now and then finish off with a little bit more about the archive. So I feel like DIY culture, DIY being do-it-yourself, has many synergies with activism, and of course is often both at the same time. Because whilst they're not at all mutually exclusive, but looked at separately, they have so many common aspects. Getting on with things, social conscience imperatives, a need to seek and create change, to create a better world, to seek freedom and fight against oppression, and just create better outcomes for ourselves. And punk, for me, gives some people from ordinary backgrounds who maybe haven't had a great educational experience and lack a sense of entitlement and empowerment. They give us permission, and permission to do, to try, and to be unafraid of the consequences of taking risks. And if you've been brought up with no safety net and born into a situation where you have to earn from the earliest age and hand over a portion of your earnings, like I had to do when I was young, then taking risks can be a really scary prospect. And it limits opportunity if you're from a certain type of background, because you could literally lose everything. You know, you could lose your home, and also reputationally as well. So that sense of entitlement, some people have that sense of entitlement, and it means that they have a reputational resilience and don't care what people think, baked into their privilege. But working class people don't have that, do they? They don't feel that. But maybe, and I'm finally getting to what I said I might do, defining punk, maybe punk gives that to them. And so to end on something of a definition, I think maybe punk is a creative enabler, and permission to do it yourself. And that might not seem particularly radical to everyone in the room, but if you have a lot of barriers to face, I think it absolutely is. So that's kind of me just about finished with what I wanted to say, but I couldn't really be here and not plug the Red Shoes poster archive. We're over across the road for the next couple of days in Chapter. Come and say hello. We just moved into Temple of Peace in Cardiff. If you don't know about it, it's an amazing building with an amazing history. And it feels like the perfect place for us. And so we're going to finally be able to be open to the public by appointment. And we're looking for volunteers. We're looking for posters. And we're hopefully going to have a proper open day. And that's, find out more about us there. So thank you very much. Thank you to Creative Mornings and Printed Festival. Cheers.